I think I'm going to start with Jennifer Gardner, who is a vice president at the Insurance Institute for Business and Home Safety, or IBHS. And Jennifer's role has been to help people and businesses understand various mitigation techniques and strategies to help. And later on, we're going to hear from some vendors as well as a homeowner who have implemented some of these strategies or offer these strategies or products and help to harden your property. In here in Southern California, a wildfire is a big problem. So, Jennifer, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and about your role with IBHS?
Yeah, thank you. So I joined IBHS a couple of years ago as a senior director for membership and industry engagement. Prior to that, I worked for a little more than a decade at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners and supported the Climate and Resilience Task Force there, as well as some prior work on other property casualty issues. I do have some slides that I'd like to share with you all today, just to kind of walk through the organization, which is a little unique and not all that well known. IBHS was actually formed by the property casualty insurance industry in 1977 to help coordinate emerging property insurance plans and reduce growth in residual markets. The organization began providing the insurance industry with technical information about building codes, land use, building designs, and retrofit options. That was mostly due to their post-disaster investigations in the early days. And then in 2010, we built this. It was before I joined the organization. Um, but the research center was established, and this is actually located in Richburg, South Carolina, a small little area in a rural town. And we can recreate up to a Cat 3 hurricane, simulate wildfire impacts, and then we also study wildfire and wind-driven rain as well. And so this is our mission statement up on the screen here. It is really about reducing the impact to communities and homeowners and business owners when severe storms strike their area. So with that, I will show you a lot of our work is out in the field and looking at post-disaster investigations, whether that be hurricanes, derechos, tornadoes, wildfire occurrences, looking at the building stock that exists in that property or in that area after the storm comes through and really taking a look at what principles of that property made it survive, as well as being able to recreate and simulate those experiences in the lab helps us identify what the weakest link was, and then to shore up those weakest links in the property to make the properties more resilient. We have a hail field study that goes out into the field every year. This past year, they spent 6 weeks out in the field. It was 19 different organizations, and they really did a deep dive on hail swaths. If you've ever seen the movie Twister, you can kind of think of it in that regard. They were chasing hailstorms and identifying the properties of the hail, the concentration, the sizes, things of that nature, where it's most likely to fall. These are some of the research experiments that we've simulated in the research center itself. So this one was in particular on the roofing materials and how it was affixed to the property. We call that the continuous load path. We look at things like interior water losses and what's driving that, whether that be windows, doors, mostly on roofs. We have a hail cannon in the lab where we impact test different materials on the exterior cladding. And then obviously we're doing wildfire testing as well. And I'll kind of dig into that a little bit more today. But we did 11 accessible dwelling unit burns last year to kind of identify the structure separation that was necessary in order to keep homes safe at a normal distance. And so, as I mentioned, wind, hail, wind-driven rain, and wildfire, those are our perils, and that is largely driven by the losses that are happening in the insurance industry. We are fully funded by the insurance industry still to this day. And so they heavily play into the research that we do in the lab. So this is the lab. These are the perils. This is really about the insured losses are really just the tip of the iceberg. There's a lot more going into it than that. You've got climatic events. You've also got demand surge that occurs after an event. You've got a lockup in labor and construction materials. And so, what we're doing to try to identify these weakest links and reduce the overall losses and keep people in their homes is we're looking at the wildfire models and the climatic conditions that go into a conflagration, and then we're doing the post-disaster investigations, bringing that back to the lab to form a hypothesis and do some experimental testing and find those weakest links. Conflagration follows humans, drought, and wind. Those are the like kind of ingredients that go into the recipe to cause a conflagration. And the severity is determined based on the structure separation, the connective fuels, and the building materials in that environment that really fuel the fire. If there is no wind, it is mu a much less severe event. And so, what we see with all of the rapid wildfire conflagrations is you've got these winds that are, at least 50 miles and above. I think Lahaina was 70. LA fires were up to 90 and higher. And so you really see the wind that is causing the embers and the flames to transfer at a greater distance. When the embers are able to find a combustible material, then they are spreading that fire into the community. Once it gets into the building components, that it becomes a conflagration, and also is just it burns so hot. The wind also causes the fire suppression ability it really hinders the fire suppression ability. Um, so what you see is local fire departments that are really just overwhelmed and unable to make an impact on stopping the fire from progressing. And then once the home ignites, there's a 90% chance that it will completely burn down. And this is a statistic from CAL FIRE, which is one of our critical stakeholders and partners in this space. We've actually hired some former chiefs who have been with CAL FIRE before, and were on the ground in the LA County fires while the conflagrations were still occurring, and meeting with the CAL FIRE crews and going out and doing the post-disaster investigations. So if you can reduce the structure ignitions, you can reduce the likelihood of the conflagration. We've studied a lot of key materials and what goes into the making of the conflagration and the different materials that can burn in the lab. And this is just one observation where we're looking at ember accumulation. There's a lot of embers that get thrown at a property when you've got these wind conditions and a wildfire event. And so the embers will find whatever they can to ignite. This is actually a simulation that was done in the research facility. We've got ember generators, and then we're using the fans to kind of propel those at different materials and testing those data elements. That has all culminated in the Wildfire Prepared Home program. We have two levels, base and plus. Base is really available at a retrofit option, and then plus is more of a new build because you're going to get into things like the exterior siding and the windows and things of that nature. And so, there's different price points that go into that. We can talk about that a little bit. We do have some public facing materials that are out there and publicly available for anyone to grab. So feel free to use this QR code. We'll have a more robust version of the LA County wildfire post-disaster investigation next month. But really, right away, we had a couple of good pieces of early insights from that investigation that they had done with CAL FIRE. A lot of the investigation in LA County really reaffirmed things that they had already learned from prior experiments and post-disaster investigations in places like the Marshall Fire in Lahaina and in Hawaii. What we ended up doing with the LA County fire was pulling it out from the home level and looking at it at a community scale. So, really, you can do a lot of really great things to your own property, but if your neighbor hasn't mitigated their risk and they're within that 30 feet separation, there's not a lot you can do. And so, we really encourage communities to act together in this regard. Um, so the way we look at this with Wildfire Prepared Neighborhood, which was launched in July of this year, is really protecting the pink houses, the ones on the perimeter, from flame contact. Those would be the Wildfire Prepared Plus level, and then anything on the inside, you're really protecting from embers, from those, floating embers that are being driven by the wind. And so the homes on the interior of the neighborhood would be built to the wildfire prepared base level. We do have our first wildfire prepared neighborhood that was established in Escondido, California. KB Homes is a developer that builds in that area. They had seen a wildfire demonstration that we did in Anaheim during the Pacific Coast Builders Association conference. And they decided to kind of retrofit what they were planning at the Dixon Trail development. And excuse me. And they ended up developing a wildfire prepared neighborhood, and it didn't cost that much more. They were able to get some economies of scale, being that it was at the neighborhood level, and it was really just $3,000 more per home and they built them all to plus, just for that added protection. This allowed them to get insurance much more quickly than they might have otherwise. So we still have some challenges in this space. There's a lot of, the zone zero regulation has been a challenge, and then really getting neighbors to collectively act together in this space in a really meaningful way. So we're working with the local officials there, policy development, and codes experts in this space. So that's a bit about the organization and our work at our IBHS.
So IBHS creates these sort of templates for plus or base, and you don't actually do the work. There are vendors or contractors that do that.
Yeah, actually, in the wildfire space, a homeowner can do the work themselves, potentially, especially at the base level where a lot of it is on like the landscaping and vents, adding some mesh to the vents and things of that nature. But no, we are not doing the work ourselves. We do require that when the work is done, there are photos taken of the property, and then we have an evaluation team that is looking at ensuring that all the right steps have been taken. And then we offer a designation, which is a certificate to the homeowner. And there are several of our members who issue discounts for that designation.
Got it. Very good. So going in alphabetical order, Karen and Matthew, um, do you want to tell us a little bit about your product?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me get screen share going here for you. So my name's Corinne. This is Matthew. We're the owners of Timber Pro Coatings up in Portland, Oregon. Matthew's are also our chief scientist, and he's a retired wildland firefighter from Douglas County in Oregon here. So we were very lucky to have him as he developed our fire retardant, EmberGuard. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that product and how we developed it and why, and the specifics of it. So, this is EmberGuard. So as everyone knows, there's a huge amount of structure fires annually, around 500,000 in the US every year, resulting in nearly 3,000 deaths, nearly 12,000 injuries. And the average annual losses, property losses due to fire in the US are around 8.1 billion per year. We all know that that's just an average. There are extreme outlier years, like last year or this year, for example, the LA wildfires with over $60 billion in damage. This chart shows the billion-dollar plus wildfire disasters in just the last 10 years in the US. There have been over 11 wildfire events that have cumulatively caused more than $1 billion in damage for that fire, with nearly 400 casualties. These extreme outliers are becoming less extreme and less of an outlier as we continue on each year. So, with that in mind, we and with how fires spread, Matthew will talk a little bit more about that, although Jennifer did a great overview of that as well. So,
Yeah, so structures can ignite from like many different situations. From wildfires, it's like the windborne embers igniting the siding, the decking, fences, and soffits, eaves, trim, and brush. Primarily the brush along the side of the building is a huge concern because then it makes a flame right next to your building, and anything that's combustible will combust with time. And in structure fires, the surface flame spread from ignition source enables room-to-room fire growth, and that's one of the big concerns that we thought of when we created EmberGuard. But we'll talk more about that later. Significantly accelerates the timeline to structural collapse from room to room to room. Um, in both scenarios, if you reduce the ignition and slow the spread, you'll have reduced losses.
so while wildfires are a huge concern, we also know that there are still a lot of structure fires that are caused by other sources. 49% of home fires are caused from cooking. 20% are caused by heating equipment. 12% intentional acts or smoking. A lot of wildfires fall within those kind of intentional acts. And 9% are caused by electrical and lighting. That's actually another pretty big component of wildfire spread is electrical lines in windstorms and power storms. So we wanted to create a product that addressed all of these potential fire sources and concerns. Um, the key reality is that fire loss is driven by the spread, not necessarily just the ignition source. So if you can control the surface ignition and the spread, it's most effective for reducing the total loss outcomes. So Matthew's going to tell you a little bit more about fire retardants and their classification for coatings. So
Yeah, so I'll kind of like lay it out as far as what we did. We took some Douglas fir from Lowe's, just a big box store, and we wanted to be authentic to what people actually really use. And we coated it with our EmberGuard fire retardant, and we put it in a Steiner tunnel. You can see it here in the video. It's a big long tube, and they have torches on one end. They light it up, and they want to measure the flame spread index, the FSI, and the smoke development index, the SDI. Something we're going to emphasize here heavily is the smoke development index. So, as a wildland firefighter, my first job is to make sure that life is protected, and then secondary is the structures. That's just our job. And so, when we made the fire retardant, we want to make sure that the SDI was as low as possible. So you have a class A rating between 0 to 25 for the flame spread index and a SDI, the smoke development index, between 0 and 450. And Corinne has the reference point for what that would be. That's 100 and, what was it, 110?
So typically red
20?
oak burns at the smoke development index for red oak is 100. For Doug fir, it is 70, and they also base the flame spread index off of how fast red oak burns. So red oak, that's very flammable. It burns fast and hot. So that score is 100. If anything, the flame spread rating is 25 or less, means that it burns 25% as fast as red oak would. So
Yeah, and anything honestly less than 100, you're getting better and better as terms of survivability inside of a building with the smoke development index. You want to get as close to 0 as possible. But you can create a fire retardant that's a class A because you pass that flame spread index of 0 to 25, but you have a product that produces 450 on the smoke and still get a class A fire retardant, which is, in our perspective, not okay because the occupants would no longer be alive.
That being said, one of the reasons we do focus on the smoke developed index is that 60 to 80% of all enclosed fire-related deaths are caused by smoke inhalation. So being able to control the smoke is a huge driver of saving life. It also gives people more time to escape the structure. It gives firefighters more time to get in there and safely fight it if you're suppressing that smoke. So it's just extending the timeline of how long someone can survive, how long someone can um, fight the fire. So that one was a really important part of our product development, is not looking not just at flame spread, which is incredibly important, but also the smoke developed index as well. So all those factors being considered, we developed our product called EmberGuard. It is a Class A fire retardant under the ASTM E84 test, tested by QAI Laboratories there in California. It is one of the first fire retardants on the market that we have ever found, that the lab has found, that has an SDI score of 0, which means it is virtually smokeless. It is not producing any smoke. When flame does spread across and slightly char it, there's no smoke produced. It also has a flame spread index of less than 25 for the Class A. It's a semi-permanent mineral-based barrier, which is relatively unique in the fire retardant space. Our product is non-toxic, it's 0 VOC, it has a health product declaration and LEED credits available for it. It's also water resistant and helps with dimensional stability of your lumber. It's if someone were looking to use it in conjunction with like an aesthetic coating, if they had wood siding and wanted to maintain that look, it's compatible with our stains and coatings, our LS Pro, our LSS, and our interior urethane product. And it's also pest and rot resistant. So
Does it go over top of the paint or underneath the paint?
it would go underneath the paint. It goes on like raw siding, or it could be put on framing, OSB, subfloors, walls, any uncoated wood surface, but then you could stain or paint over it. So it's for untreated wood surfaces initially. One of the things that's unique about it from the mineral barrier perspective versus intumescent. Most fire retardant coatings are intumescent, which means that they form a layer of foam a bit on the surface that kind of insulates that material from char. So that char layer on an intumescent coating is vulnerable over about 600 degrees Celsius. That coating does produce, when it chars, it does produce smoke during the charring, and that smoke contains halogenated gases, ammonia, cyanates, and carcinogens most of the time. So not great to breathe in intumescent smoke. It's typically an opaque paint, so it hides the natural wood. It can degrade outdoors over time with UV, moisture, and mechanical wear and tear. It's film forming, so it requires pretty strict thickness controls, which means more intensive application procedures that are less likely to be able to be done by a layperson. Most of them require maintenance recoats every 3 to 5 years. If it's a substrate that has been covered over before then, it's really hard to get to if you're doing framing or something and you want a fire retardant coating on that. Once that's drywalled in, you're not going to get back in there 3 to 5 years later to recoat it. And then it's not great with moisture because it's a thicker film forming coating. It can blister, delaminate with moisture cycling. All of this conversely with EmberGuard being that semi-permanent mineral matrix, it resists erosion. So it's deep inside the wood. It's a penetrating coating, so it's not just sitting on the surface. So that barrier doesn't just burn away. It inhibits pyrolysis and reduces the fuel availability by limiting how much oxygen can be used by the fire. It's got a much higher failure temperature of over 900 degrees Celsius. So it gives you more protection for longer. Again, it has a smoke developed index of 0, non-toxic, 0 VOC, so you're not breathing in any of those harmful chemicals that might be released with other fire retardant compounds. It's got the health product declaration. It's clear and it preserves the natural grain of the wood if you're using it on exposed aesthetic wood, architectural siding. It's UV stable, it's inorganic, so it's not going to degrade over time. It again helps guard against pest intrusion. They don't like to chew through that mineral barrier. It's a penetrating wood coating, so it's much easier applied by a layperson. If you can spray something that has the texture of water, you can use the Ember Guard. You can just spray it on, roll it, brush it. It goes on very easily. Um, it doesn't volatilize or wash out, and it becomes part of that internal matrix, helping with rot and moisture over time while still having a bit of breathability for the wood.
So it's like a miracle product. I would imagine it's not free.
It's not free, but it is a really good option. We'll talk a little bit more about the costs. This does really help for insurance outcomes because it reduces the likelihood of ignition on high-risk wood surfaces. It slows the fire growth, decreasing severity and total loss probability. It directly correlates to that lower smoke production, leading to less fatalities. And we know that smoke damage can be a huge driver of financial losses in fires as well. And it's a relatively low cost mitigation layer. So if someone were to want to treat the entirety of a new build, all their framing, subfloors, roof deck, all the plywood, OSB, everything for a 2,500 square foot home, depending on the amount of surfaces they wanted to treat, if they were also treating exterior wood siding, they could treat that anywhere from between five to $15,000 or so average for a 2,500 square foot house. Conversely, the cost to rebuild for a total loss significantly higher if you're doing $250 to $400 a square foot, which is probably pretty low in California. The cost to rebuild a home that size is going to be 600,000 to $1 million. So it's going to make sense financially, especially helping with both the rot, moisture, extending the life of the materials over time. It makes sense in the field with new construction. You can apply it to framing, roof decking, soffits, fascia, siding, decking, fences, protecting those critical ignition sources before the structure is ever really exposed to risk. You can also use it in existing home retrofits. So if you are remodeling and you have the kitchen opened up and you want to spray all your framing in there, do it. You can quickly harden some of the vulnerable surfaces during remodels without full extensive demolition. Just treat what is available to be treated. It's great for high-risk zones, areas where embers are going to accumulate under the eaves, on fences, decks, those vertical ignition paths. And then the additional benefits, again, when it's applied to framing or interior or exterior wood, it reduces moisture damage, rot, pest intrusion, increasing the lifespan of the materials.
And so with this photo here, it's a very simple photo of the framing that's involved in most stick-built homes. I call them stick-built homes because it's all sticks, versus a concrete home, right? A lot of people can't afford a concrete home. They're really expensive, millions of dollars. But yeah, of course, they're going to be way more wildfire resistant and fire resistant in general. But a stick-built home, most people can afford comparatively. And if you just do a little bit of work and put some Ember Guard throughout the framing of the process, like you are leveling the playing field with those $1 million mansions built from concrete. You won't have situations like in LA or Lahaina where you'll have 30 homes that are burnt to the ground and then one concrete home built by a wealthy individual that survived. You'll be leveling the playing field, and more of the homes that are built from sticks should be standing.
Great. I'm so sorry, so that we can
We're
let
we're all
everybody.
we're all set. We're done. So
Yeah. Well,
please
it's
continue on.
yeah, as I said, it's like a miracle. So Dan, I think you probably have a solution also that you'd like to enter into the conversation.
Sure. I'll probably, can you hear me? Yep.
Yes.
I'll probably be a little less product oriented than Karen and Matt, but that seems like an amazing product. And Jennifer, great presentation. Thank you, David, and the CPCU community for organizing this discussion. I am going to tell you about Invetwood. I am going to tell you about Superwood, but just by way of background, I spent most of my career on Capitol Hill, lobbying for the real estate industry, working with the stakeholders in the real estate industry, the building and construction trades, the shopping center folks, the industrial office parks folks, et cetera. And after a long career in lobbying, got into technology innovation and have always sat between what I would call the impediments of government and the opportunities of government and technology innovation. And I came to know Inventwood at the University of Maryland, right uh, close to Capitol Hill, where Professor Ling-Bing Hu, now the head of material science at Yale, was inventing this amazing product where he densified wood to achieve amazing properties, which I'll tell you about. So I'm going to flip up a little presentation here and go to my desktop. Is that what we're doing? And then come right over here. All right. All right. So just to step back for a second and talk about where we are on climate today. Wildfire is no longer a occasional disaster, and climate events are no longer occasional disasters. It's a permanent market condition. It's reshaping insurance markets, construction costs, homeowner material decisions, public budgets across the country. And the challenge now is to move from resilience uh, and what and that requires connecting what I would call forest management, material innovation, public policy, insurance incentives into a coordinated system. If we look at California, which always has such an outsized impact on the market and is always at the forefront of government and policy innovation, they have uh, dangerously overstocked amounts of wood, excess wood that fuels and drives megafires. But it's also a renewable resource that, if used wisely, can become part of the solution. Last week, I was up in Pittsburgh at the R.K. Mellon Foundation's Working Forest Conference, and I met organizations such as Blue Forest, the Timberland Investment Resources, which are investing in forest restoration, rural jobs, biomass recovery, and they're helping turn overgrown high-risk forests into healthier, more productive landscapes. At Inventwood, we focus on what happens next, transforming that same renewable resource into durable, fire-resistant structural materials, stronger than steel, lighter than steel, that can replace steel and concrete and store carbon for decades and make buildings safer. If you look at California, earlier this year, the California Board of Forestry and Fire Protection, this Joint Institute for Wood Products Innovation, released a very interesting report, which I'd encourage you all to read, called The Assessment of State Agency Procurement Protocols Related to Innovative Wood Products. The study highlighted the gap between ambitious climate policies in California and an innovative wood product value chain. The study highlighted how state procurement policies can accelerate the use of low carbon, high performance wood materials that improve wildfire resilience, reduce carbon emissions, and expand domestic manufacturing capacity. Inventwood also submitted comments just recently to California's CARB's SB 905 implementation process for carbon capture, removal, utilization, and storage. And our comments emphasized that we need to recognize that durable biogenic carbon storage materials that lock carbon into long-lived buildings should be an essential element of the state's climate policy going forward. These initiatives in aligning policy, procurement, and innovation are critical to have that kind of outcomes we need for resilience in the marketplace. Now, on these slides here, I'm showing you uh, characteristics of Superwood. We are uh, a startup out of the University of Maryland that got a substantial funding from the DOE, has gotten support from DARPA, has commissioned a 89,000 square foot production facility in Frederick, Maryland, where we are commercializing Superwood. Superwood has very interesting characteristics, and I'm gonna try to. What we've done is we've taken regular dimensional lumber and we've changed and re-engineered the molecular structure of the wood to create a material that is extremely strong, extremely durable, and extremely fire resistant and resistant to all environmental stressors. Basically, if you think of a tree as a straw and you think about it being densified to where there's absolutely no porosity whatsoever in the wood. And I was holding earlier an example of a piece of dimensional lumber and a piece of superwood. The superwood is the about the same mass, but about a fourth of the original volume of that dimensional lumber. It is fire resistant, moisture resistant, dent resistant, termite resistant, fungus resistant, and thermally stable. It is the strongest wood in the world. And if I didn't have this in a PDF, I could show you at 10x speed how, because the material is so uh, has absolutely no porosity, that it takes, I can't see my screen here. I apologize. I'm going to push that out. Um, uh, I think it takes 6 times longer for it to burn than Ipe, which is also gets a Class A fire resistance. Um, and the the material is species agnostic. So right now we're making superwood from reclaimed poplar, which gives us a real negative net zero carbon. So this would have been wood that would have gone into the landfill. And we've tested, I believe, 19 different species. We get the same result from all these species. So no matter what is the abundant species in a area where we could be producing superwood, we can produce superwood. So from for insurers, this creates a tangible opportunity to recognize and reward materials that reduce ignition risk and structural loss potential, integrating these advances into resilience scoring, premium credits, and retrofit programs aligned with low carbon policies and life cycle assessments could yield measurable reductions in both physical and financial risk. We've had uh, recent articles in the Wall Street Journal, big article in CNN last week. We've had tremendous interest from California homeowners in the WUI fire districts. And California, which is already mobilized for wildfire and forest resilience. The next step is to connect that investment to the built environment, transforming forest restoration into safer, lower carbon homes and infrastructure. And that's the opportunity that turns risk into resilience by aligning public policy, private capital, and material innovation. Thank you. Hopefully I got you back on track.
David, I think you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. Daniel, just in the couple minutes that we have left,
Sure.
is this under super compression or is it soaked in some liquid? How is it?
Yeah, there is a chemical process, a heat process, and a pressure process which produces superwood. In the end, it's just 100% wood. There's no retained chemical in the material. There's no it's all 100% natural wood. So you're looking here at a piece of dimensional lumber and a piece of superwood.
So when Jennifer made her presentation early on about, you know, securing the perimeter of a housing development, um, you know,
Right.
again, that's not
And
free. I'd imagine superwood is costly. Is that accurate?
well, this is our first plant, and it's a first of its kind plant, and it also has a innovation lab that has a significant square footage component to the plant. The plant's about, I'd say, about 72,000 square feet. It's 89,000 square foot plant. So there's an innovation lab that is a component of it. Uh, we can double the production line and will double the production line at this plant, but the next plant will be a plant that's 30x the capacity of the production capacity of this plant.
If you can uh, ballpark a number for if I'm to build my house with superwood, what does that do to the ticket price?
Well, there are going to be applications where superwood is over engineered for. Uh, we're going to be doing exterior cladding. We're going to be doing interior flooring. We're going to be doing structural components, and those are the kind of three things we're going to focus on. And the end use applications for exterior, interior, and structural could vary, and they will probably, from this plant, from the our current production capacity, be high end, high margin.
Understood. I apologize to the group, but we are going to rejoin the larger group. Victor will rejoin us. Victor, um, just in a few seconds, are you, you've seen these three presentations and you have undertaken your own personal, uh, rebuild or renovation. Um, how do you look at this?
So I think it's an interesting question. So we recently started renovating a 100-year-old home, and it's as Jennifer was saying, like the different areas of wildfire risk. So this home is actually located it's literally on the border of the wildland urban interface. So across the street is the mountain. So the fire got as close as, we had a two-lane street that broke the fire, but it was across the street, so we had smoke damage, things like that. And as with all the things that come with a renovation of a house, one of the big things was how do you make this wildfire resistant or as much as possible? But at the same time, you saw all the toxic issues that you had in Altadena and things like that with the Eden fire. So that's when we came across both Timber Pro and Inventwood. And so there's a lot of applications like, we're not going to tear down the home and rebuild it. So Timber Pro plays a key role for things like when we redo the roof, we'll coat all the sheathing on the roof with Timber Pro. So that way, when we coat that with Ember Guard, that'll kind of give us that barrier for any sort of embers that may flow in any sort of future wildfire. But at the same time, structural beams, things like that in the house, that's all 100-year-old lumber. So that's something where Inventwood, Superwood would play a key role because you can, once that is kind of on market, we can replace a lot of that dimensional lumber with something that's not a steel beam that still kind of contributes to being a carbon sink, keeps the character of the home, but at the same time provides the stability to allow it to, live on for another 100 years possibly. So I think there's a combination where both products fit pretty unique roles and kind of there's so many things in Southern California that because we don't have seasons, they last forever, so nobody's going to go and change all the lumber on their house. So like, what's the way that these people can adapt to kind of move that forward and mitigate this risk versus just throwing your arms up and saying there's nothing I can do about it. And at the same time, not going broke over it. So I think there's a world where they both exist and they both play a key role. And I think if we embrace new technologies like that and just kind of just raise awareness so people know about it. I think that's such a huge thing is once people know about it and it becomes mainstream, that's what really moves the needle.
Got it.
And the more technologies that are embraced, the more economies of scale and cost benefit will come to the market.